Let's move on to Jabari Parker. I know you have him number 1. Do you want to elaborate kind of why you see him as the number 1 overall pick in the draft ahead of everybody else?
I have this thing about Parker that people seem to, because he's a polished offensive player, people seem to assume that he has low ceiling and that he's not going to improve much more because he's NBA ready, and that just really frustrates me. Because you're talking about, a 19-year-old freshman who's got one of the most polished offensive games we've seen coming out of the draft in years, and just because he can already do things doesn't mean he's not going to get better. So that's one side of it. I don't see him being a kind of a low upside kind of guy. I also think he's more athletic than people give him credit for. I know he may not have tested great at the Chicago Combine, but it's great. People can jump high and touch metal bars. Zach LaVine has a 46-inch vertical. That's fantastic. You want to use it in a game, Zach, when you're not on a one-and-on fast break? It's how you use your athleticism in the game. I seen Parker being able to get into the heart of the defense, being able to dunk over people. So I'm quite happy about his athletic ability. Obviously, defensively, there's things to work with. I definitely think he can be a 3. He was carrying 10 to 15 too many pounds this year. When he gets to the NBA, they're going to be getting on a weight regime, going to get him eating right. I think he's going to find more athleticism from that. I also think it's going to make him lighter, so he'll be able to move a little quicker. So, personally, I just see him being a 20 points per game scorer. He's a great teammate. He's the kind of guy who isn't going to take people's shots, but at the same time, when the game's going down to the end, he will take over when it's needed to. So I think any coach would love to have him on the team. He's a consummate professional teammate, and he's just got one of the most diverse skill sets in the draft.
He's number 4 on my big board, and I completely agree with him improving part. The thing with Parker is I think he's the best offensive player in this draft. He can shoot, create, and then there is worry on defense, and he doesn't seem to be the best lateral athlete, though he seems to be pretty explosive. So with Parker, I'm high on him. I mean, 4th is pretty high, but I don't think he will be the best player from this class, simply because I think defense is even underrated in the NBA. You have guys like J.R. Smith making big money when they don't really give much on the defensive end. He can shoot it, score, pretty strong, young, so I think he's a good pick.
Yeah, I have Parker a little bit lower than both of you guys. I agree with James that, he has a great personality, he has great scoring instincts, he has great rebounding instincts. He seems to really care about winning. He brings a lot of competitive intensity. Also, his athleticism isn't really that bad. But overall, I don't think his tools are really that good. He's a little undersized for a power forward. For a small forward, he has, good size. And I think his athleticism is fine. But, he's a little under equipped. So no matter what, he doesn't really have a niche where he's likely to be strong defensively. I don't think he's completely hopeless defensively. Like, he's not a lock to be bad defensively like Nick Stauskas or Doug McDermott or Julius Randle. But, he's probably going to be a liability. I'd say the one narrative that kind of is going under discussed is that he has a really bad assist-to-turnover ratio, and he's really selfish. It seemed like he started the year when Duke was playing more of the bad teams. He was always, making the right pass, playing unselfish, and he was also making all his shots. But then kind of as the season went on, the tougher the competition that Duke faced, the less he passed.
Just something I really want to just quickly add is, I see Chad Ford praising Jabari Parker because of his super high IQ and passing, but he doesn't have great shot selection, and that kind of concerns me. I agree with he's a bit selfish. Shot selection is not the best.
So Carmelo Anthony is, his comparison, but Carmelo Anthony had twice the assist-to-turnover ratio as a college freshman, and, he's not really considered to be that unselfish.
I was just going to say that the best players in the NBA, what makes the best players is that they can shoot, they can drive, and they can pass the ball, they can handle the ball, they can create for other people. So you're never going to be a franchise guy unless you can really create for others and create scoring opportunities for yourself. So I totally agree with you there. Parker's assist-to-turnover ratio was not good. It's something he definitely needs to work on. But here's the flip side of this, that I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this. I just think, it's probably somewhere in the middle. But, I interviewed Shelvin Mack when the NBA came to London last year. And he basically talked about how when he was a Butler, his coach didn't really want him to pass the ball that much. His coach said, when you get the ball coming off a screen, I want you to be getting off a shot, because I think that is a higher percentage luck than you trying to make a pass with 8 seconds left on the shot clock. And he says, it was kind of a myth that he's going to all these draft workouts and people were telling him he couldn't pass. And he was like, well, I could pass. It's just not what I was doing to win. So part of me thinks that Coach K, might have got Parker kind of in that role, wanting him to take those shots. Now, that doesn't excuse turnovers and things like that, but I just think that's one factor we have to take into account. And I just want to get both of your opinions on another thing. Parker played a lot of the time, especially defensively at center. Do you think that was... Some people you look at this in two ways. Some say it was trying to hide him on defense, or some were saying, it was out of necessity because they had no one else who could play there, and he was the best person they had. And a lot of the time he was guarding 4s and 5s who are a lot bigger than him, and that's why sometimes he got a little bit abused. So I'm interested to see which side of the spectrum you fall on that.
Yeah, they just didn't have any other options. I watched a lot of the other guy they tried starting at center was Josh Harrison. Josh Harrison was just terrible, and Marshall Plumlee wasn't really that ready either. So, those are the two kind of true centers on the roster.
Who would you guys pick if you were the Cavs with the number 1 selection? With all the injury rumors, who would you select, or would you really try to look for a trade?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty simple. I would go Jabari Parker just because, I already think, for me, he's the best player in the draft. I mean, Embiid, I think, would have been up there, actually, before the injuries, but I see him as the best player in the draft. I think he would fit into Cleveland well. I don't care about it being LeBron James' position because that's just not happening anytime soon. Yeah, I just think he'll do really well there. And I think he'd bring a sense of professionalism to that Cleveland team. And even though he is young, he's a mature guy. And that Cleveland locker room definitely needs some kind of guys to really step up and take responsibility. And I think he'd do that.
I'd actually probably take Andrew Wiggins. One of my concerns is if you have Parker and Irving, two guys who aren't great defensive players as your 2 stars, that's a little concerning to me. But yeah, I'd probably go Wiggins, but it's close. Embiid would also be a good selection, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about Jabari and Kyrie, because you're kind of, doubling down on creation. And, I think, kind of in the passing, like Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire, those don't work the best. I think it's a tough pick for Cleveland. It's just so open-ended because there's just so many good possibilities and nobody who just really stands out as the best.